Hi, thanks for joining us. This is Nick Thompson. That is Xander Malzoff. Hi, Xander.
Hey, Nick.
Hey. So we've been thinking about doing this intros, biases, and opinions episode for a while, and it's become just this daunting task because trying to decide what you tell people about yourself and certain things about your life and what you think about things is pretty much impossible. Like you keep thinking about something else. Oh, I should mention this. I should mention that. So we can't do a 10-hour episode. So we're
I
just
just
going.
assume everyone should just go on my Facebook and see all the memes that I share, and
Oh,
that will
that's
give
true.
you insight into my whole
You will
life.
learn a lot about Xander
That's all
just
you can.
looking
That's
at
all you
him.
need. I would actually suggest you just learn about that and remember that about the birds and how they're not real.
Birds are not real.
Just to put that
So
out there. Anyway,
that might give you some insight right there. So instead of doing all that, we're going to do real quick intros, and then we're just going to bullshit
oops.
for a little bit, and you can pick up what you can from our conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to make Xander go first because I'm talking right now,
Oh,
and he doesn't have any control
I.
over the conversation.
All
So
right. Wow.
Xander,
I
tell
get
us a little
started.
bit about yourself.
I was born. I was born in what you people would think of as Silicon Valley, technically.
Okay. Okay.
That
Gotcha.
is which is Silicon. Like I never thought about it growing up. Silicon Valley is like several areas, but no, I was born basically in Redwood City. Lived in the Bay Area. Spent some time in Maine because that makes sense. The natural progression from you know
Right.
Silicon Valley. My parents are like where do we got to go? We want to get far away from here. It's like okay, an island on Maine, on the
Oh,
coast of
geez.
Maine.
Yeah, that really is about the opposite.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're like we just really want to get far away from here.
Right.
I don't know why they Yeah, not sure. I actually have never heard a good reason as to why that was the decision to just move 3,200 miles across the country.
Be a family mystery. We could write a screenplay about that. It's a
I,
dark secret.
I mean, I don't remember much except for just hanging out on this island playing with some toys.
That's
But
cool though.
anyway, we moved, and then we, of course, were like, oh, living on an island in Maine kind of sucks. So we moved back to the Bay Area and lived in San
Right.
Francisco, basically from when I was 4 until 11 or 12.
Right.
So yeah, I was actually just thinking about this the other day about yeah, just like growing up in San Francisco and how strange that is compared to growing up in a lot of places. I'd say.
Oh, I can imagine. Or I
Well,
can't
because
imagine
I mean,
really.
the
Yeah.
first off, I went to this school in the Castro, which, if you're not familiar with San Francisco, is the gay hub, basically of like the United States. So,
Predominantly,
so
yeah,
yeah,
gay neighborhood, San
gay,
Francisco,
gay and
famously.
lesbian, that whole scene.
Hmm.
So growing up as a kid, going to school there, you just think, oh, like everyone has rainbow flags, and there's just I don't know, met like I knew,
Crazy stuff in the windows.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't weird,
Yeah.
and like all that stuff was very normalized to the point like people used gay as an insult, and it was very strange. Like, oh, that guy's gay, and I was like, what do you mean?
Right. Well, tell us where you heard that because after 12 you moved to.
Well, oh, well, yeah. That's where I met Nick right when I moved to Sacramento after San Francisco,
Right. So at 12-ish, it was fifth grade. So
fifth
whatever
grade.
age
Which
that is, I
is
forget.
that 12,
I don't
12,
know.
11, 12,
Yeah,
roughly.
something
We
like that.
could do some math there, but
Right.
I just wanted to mention just the funniest, just like the thing.
Oh, okay.
Oops. Makes fun of this a lot for this school that I went to in the Castro. Most people, do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag,
Mm,
right? That's pretty common, I guess. This school it was a public school, so I'm not sure if this is even legal, but in
oh
San
God.
Francisco it probably was like mandatory. But you actually did a Pledge of Allegiance to the earth. Have I ever told you this?
No, I
You did a
didn't know
pledge.
that.
So like, I mean, no joke. They're like, look at something green, and I just remember there's this large, like really large wall because it's on a big hill
Uh-huh.
in the Castro, just like off the main, like off of Market Street. There's a huge hill and there's big wall and there's like a little vines of green, and we'd all look at that and pledge allegiance to the earth and for all. I was like, I was like thinking
Uh,
about that, like that, and if you did that in Texas or
right.
South Carolina, I mean, what? I mean,
Get
would you get
run out of
shot? Like,
town.
what would happen? I
Yeah.
just so
Wrangle you up.
I guess that sort of gives some context to sort of a very, I'd say, very liberal kind of upbringing, but at the same time, a very accepting, like kind of, I don't know, just
Yeah, there's definitely
people who
pros
are
and
different.
cons.
Like white kids were not the majority at Harvey
Mm,
Milk. It was very mixed. Some kids had two moms, some kids had no moms, some kids had no dads, a lot of kids, several kids had dads in prison. So it was
mm,
like it was a very interesting mix. There was one of my closest friends there was from Jordan. It was just sort of a mix, and it just was sort of that's how to me, like that was the worldview. Like, oh, everyone lives in the gay haven, and they just like it wasn't even a thing. People didn't think about it
right.
anyway. It was like so normal.
I'm sure it wasn't pointed out to you as a kid. Yeah.
No, it's not. No, it's not really pointed out, but it's also not. Yeah, just
But
something
it's
that.
it's informing your worldview for sure.
Yeah.
So
So, which, as we kind of alluded to earlier, the switch to Sacramento and is was excuse me, not the opposite, but very different.
right,
So
right. And I grew up in I grew up where we ended up, which is right outside of Sacramento, in between Sacramento and Folsom, if you must know.
oh,
Not that anyone cares, honestly, but um, I grew up there my whole life, basically until I was 19 or so when I moved out. But I met Xander in fifth grade, like you said, and we've been friends ever since. We went to the same middle school and high school, but we only had like maybe two or three classes that entire time together.
I wasn't convinced that you actually went to school. You're like, I go to school from 9 to 1 o'clock. It was always something absurd.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. So once we
You're
got to high school, I wanted to be there as few hours as humanly possible, or like as many hours as the least amount of people were there. So I would take zero period and get there super early and go home at noon. Senior year, and I got to go home at like 1 in junior
and
year.
do God knows what over there. Well, I know some of the stuff you did after school now.
Oh, Jesus Christ, dude, you're throwing me under the bus here. But no,
Yeah,
actually,
I
I
played
didn't.
video games.
Yeah, I was gonna say I play a lot of Xbox, but God, yeah, I actually waste way too much time playing Xbox. But yeah, so we went to school together, but we didn't have a lot of classes. We just hung out together. And then we've stayed friends since high school too. I think that's another fairly big departure for us. Xander took off for the collegiate path,
The
and
collegiate path.
yeah. Do you
That's a
wanna
great
you wanna go over
distinction.
your yeah.
Oh.
I to sum up, I didn't go to college, but um, Xander, do you want to discuss your academic career
Uh,
real quick?
I
I
suppose
know you love to, but
I spent most of the decade of 2010 in one form of school or another. I mean, went
oh,
back
that's
to San
true.
Francisco. Went to the University of San Francisco because it's a cool place. Well, I wanted to play soccer. That turned out to be a giant waste of time for several reasons. But wanted to play soccer there and live in San Francisco, so that's the place to go. Uh, didn't like that. Started kind of thinking about what I really want to do. The only thing that excited me was physics, but it's super hard. You got to do 15 calculus classes and linear algebra and differential equations and all this stuff. But I said, fuck
Oops.
it, like let's just do it. Uh,
Before you keep going, I should say that just listening to Xander and not knowing him, and not being able to picture him, maybe him deciding to do this when he told me was quite um, I was quite surprised. He had taken some advanced classes in high school, but he also skated most of the time after school. Well, not most of the time; it was soccer. But
Soccer,
um,
skateboarding, yeah.
yeah, he was a skateboarder. He was a skier. He
There's a little dirtbag in there, a little bit more dirtbag than most people who pursue physics. It turns out.
yeah. I mean, I would like to know the number of nuclear, you know, doctorate level people who can do a kickflip and ski a double black diamond. But where did you go after USF?
Well, I did kind of bum around a little bit and was worked at a ski shop. And for the worst ski season on record, probably in
Yeah.
Tahoe, 2014 to 2000, like that 2014-15 season was probably the worst on record. So in some ways, I think if it had been any better, I might have just stayed in Truckee and just
Oh,
done
geez.
something. But that was the worst. That was the year there was no snow. I mean,
Right.
there was like 100 inches the whole year. I remember one powder date. That was it. And yeah, bummed around in Tahoe, hung out with Nick a bunch, goofed around, and then said, well, San Francisco's a bubble. I got obsessed with nuclear engineering in the course of studying physics. That's kind of a whole other discussion, but said I want to do nuclear engineering, applied to only places outside of California and mostly large research universities, and got into a bunch. Ended up saying, hey, what's really different than San Francisco? Gainesville, Florida, birthplace of Tom Petty, and
Oh wow.
yeah, true. Rest in peace.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I wanted to go somewhere different. Went to the South, and yeah, pursued a PhD in nuclear engineering. And if you haven't been to Gainesville, Florida, I mean, you are missing some of the highlights, the treats of the world. But it's very different in a small college town, as you obviously, pretty obvious. But yeah,
I think I glossed over your USF career too. What exactly did you graduate with from there?
I graduated with a degree, Bachelor's of Science in Physics, and a minor. If anyone gives a oops, no one really does in mathematics.
No, I think it's all good to put out
But
there, kind of
yeah,
qualifications.
did a bunch of math and physics because it's cool. I mean, you get to learn about time travel in physics. Nowhere else do you get to learn about time travel. So that clearly makes it the best major to do. But
Yeah, and
I
that I
I
mean, if
thought,
you need that math to understand the physics, then
yeah,
I can understand doing that if you have to understand
yeah.
time travel, or at least.
Well, I mean, time travels. If we want, we can even talk about this in some episodes. Special relativity, the mathematics behind it are, that's one part of. That's actually what Einstein got his first Nobel Prize for, or was it? But anyway, the mathematics for special relativity, if you're curious, are not that difficult. It all comes down to how fast are you going. Like simple algebra, and you can understand how to travel in time in terms of from the perspective of you know things moving very quickly and how that affects your experience in time. That is different than general relativity, which is also what Einstein developed, which talks about how time affects objects differently as depending on their position in the gravitational field. Nevertheless, my point is you can go online now and understand some special relativity if you
Okay,
want to.
that is having a conversation with Xander
There
sometimes.
you go.
Sometimes Xander just has to tell you about special relativity, and
Yeah.
frequently uh, mind blowing conversations. But
Anyway, yeah. Did
um,
physics, played
okay,
around with that.
so you did mathematics, physics, and then you went to is it? I'm sorry, uh,
The University of Florida, the
University
Gators.
of the University of Florida, or it's
Tim
not the
Tim
Ohio
Yeah,
State,
yeah, they don't do that. It's just University of Florida. And
University of Florida.
Tim Tebow fan club.
Oh, I didn't
It's
realize
also
that.
where Emmett Smith went. The Swamp, a very famous football area. Also,
Okay.
probably the best. UF has the best overall collegiate sports. If you look at across all sports, they're probably the top school. Fun tidbit.
Hmm.
If you were to weight every single thing on the men's and women's side.
Here's a fun fact for listeners: I do not care about sports
Nick,
at all.
yeah, I knew. I
I
like to give
do
Nick
not
some facts that
understand.
he doesn't care about
I
because
just do
he
not
gets to
understand the
enrich his
appeal.
life with things he doesn't care about, like
Well,
sports and
I mean,
sports.
I understand like a vague notion of sports, but then I don't get any deeper than that.
Oh
So
yeah, no, it's not. It's a very mediocre, sort
like
of fun.
rules and pop culture, and that's about my
Yeah.
relationship with sports. But um, so what did you? Well, first of all, you got your master's degree.
Oh yeah, well, masters. When you're getting a PhD, they just give you a master's degree. It's sort of like a you just sign a paper and they give it to you. It's not like
Well, I still think it is
yeah.
important to say you did get a master's degree
Yeah,
in
yeah.
nuclear engineering, right?
In nuclear engineering, yes.
Right. And then he didn't get enough school at that point, and he kept going, ladies and gentlemen. And then he accomplished his PhD in.
It's a doctorate of philosophy in nuclear engineering. And fun tidbit
Uh,
on the diploma, nowhere does it say nuclear engineering. It just says doctor of philosophy. It could be in anything.
oh, interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, most other degrees like undergrad degrees, like I'm looking at another one right now, and it says Bachelor of Science in Nuclear Engineering. Like they just say Bachelor of Science in Biology, but the PhD one just says Degree of Doctor of Philosophy in whatever you want, which I kind of wish it said something else.
So you got your PhD, and then you moved up to Seattle with your zippy motorcycle, or did you buy that motorcycle up there?
Well, I had two motorbikes in Florida because we're in the middle of Florida. There's not nothing to do. It's like it's an amazing place to learn to ride a motorcycle though, because it's flat and straight, and you can. Yeah, Florida. There's also no helmet laws.
Mm.
The only thing you have to have is eye protection. So I have seen a grown man with sunglasses, shorts, tank top on a Hayabusa.
Oh
The
God.
most absurd. Just like that's another day in Florida. Like
If for those listeners who don't know, what is a Hayabusa, just real quick?
Hayabusa is the probably the
Fastest production
fastest
bike.
motorcycle production motorcycle in terms of all out speed. Probably not acceleration, but it has the engine from a basically a small like a Toyota Tercel size engine, like a small Toyota, like a compact car engine on a motorcycle,
Which is just insane. So
which is
yeah,
insane. Yeah, I mean the thing they didn't ever publish the. I mean probably do like an easy 200 miles an hour, 9 second quarter mile kind of thing. Just
which
absurd. It's
again is
basically one
wild.
of the fastest. Like if you ride that, it's just like, look, I'm a lunatic. I probably sell meth. I probably I don't know. I'm just a lunatic, but or not.
While Xander was doing all that school and pursuing this
Nerd shit. Yeah, for anyone. Yeah,
pursuing this
loser stuff.
God, I don't even know, this noble climate change affecting goal with his life.
Mm.
What was I doing? I was working retail mostly, between Truckee, Santa Barbara for a quick minute, Greasy, Reno.
Oh, greasy. See, you don't like Reno. I like Reno more than you. I think just
Because you don't live here, dude.
'cause I don't live. Yeah, I know. I like
Yeah.
to got to see its the high moments of Reno.
When this is not a joke. We had a I say we had a van, a broken down van in the Walmart parking lot. I'm not kidding. It was like a snapped front axle or something. Like the tires were at a crazy angle. I have no
Oh, it
idea
didn't have
what.
one. It didn't have the front driver's side tire. Just
Oh well,
like
that was at one point. I mean, at first it was just broken. It was there for a total of like 5 weeks. I'm not kidding. Um, so the first few pictures were kind of funny, but then after like the fourth week of me sending pictures to Xander and our friends, it kind of got old. But um, yeah,
yeah. So
so
okay, just kind of circling back. I mean, yeah, like you said, you lived in Santa Barbara,
hated it.
Truckee,
Sucks.
Reno.
Truckee is cool.
Truckee's cool, but I mean,
It's
like,
expensive.
what were you kind of doing? I mean, I feel like you were always kind of up to different things. Like during this, it wasn't just like you were. I mean, I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
you had the naked clothing. There was the ski stuff. I mean,
Oh yeah. Well,
I don't
I've
know. I feel like you got
worn.
to interject a little bit of that. Kind of some
Yeah.
more
I
details.
mean, that was a very nickel version of my 10 years since high school. But oh God, 10-year reunion this year if we're doing it. Um, but
It's gonna be at a TGI Fridays on Sunrise Avenue.
are you kidding?
No, I'm
I
kidding.
wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the
Oh,
Fuddruckers on Sunrise Avenue.
oh God.
If that's
Oh,
still there, I actually
Jesus
don't know.
Christ.
But
I mean,
all right, they do not advertise, so we have nothing to do with them. Yeah. So I mean, I've worked like basically everywhere. I've worked in real estate, selling $6 million homes on Lake Tahoe. I've worked in greasy snowboard shops. Uh, that was actually my first like real job, and I loved it. And Clark's is the best. It's not greasy at all. Um,
it's greasy in a good way.
yeah, exactly. It's greasy because people just like wear random T-shirts and stuff, and you have no idea who's an employee there. But when you do find an employee who actually works there, they're very knowledgeable. So, actually, they might have changed that since then. But uh, and then, like everything in between, I've managed a warehouse. Zaner mentioned naked clothing. Like I was just kind of goofing around and like started a clothing company at one point. Uh, Honestly, because I was bored, and then
Well, I think those Bill Clinton shirts in particular, those are like people know me because of that shirt
Oh,
in
really?
that's like a shirt people know. Like people are like, oh, that bill, like that shirt, like people love that shirt.
I
If you were to bring it back, it would be successful. I think that shirt people like all the time. Anytime I wore it, people loved it. What
yeah.
about the CNC stuff too? I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
spent a little
Oh
time in
God.
some nerd school.
Yeah, so I did go to school for a little bit. It was like a technical college more. I wanted to learn how to do CNC machining, which is just really high precision manufacturing
Like,
machining,
what
basically.
is that used for? Like what?
Basically,
Like
like,
give some examples. I think people know most of the stuff.
okay, so like if you looked under the hood, so to speak, of an airplane, like most of the parts in there would be made on a CNC machine because they have to be very close together in a very compact space, essentially. Like the tolerance, what it's called in the industry, is very low threshold for tolerance in between those parts. So you have to be really, really accurate, basically. So I thought I wanted to do that, and I also took some 3D design classes at the same time. Um, and I basically figured out I don't like actually machining. I like more of the design process. So it's actually been kind of handy. Like I thought for a long time that my entire manufacturing career or my schooling was wasted, but recently I've been getting really into 3D printers, and 3D printers use the same code as CNC machines, which is G code. So I know all of the manual commands for my 3D printer and know how to use this 3D software. I mean, I'm like half teaching myself, but I had a leg up because I did go to those, 3D design classes at school. So I'm definitely not like anti-college or anything, but it just wasn't for me in the way that it was for Xander, I guess.
Yeah, college is yeah. I mean, it goes yeah. It's I advocate it for people who genuinely have the interest and really believe. Yeah, I just think it's as much as you want to put into it, and if you're at a point for whatever reason where you're not able to or don't really want to or have the interest in putting in the time, you're just not going to get much out of it, or you're not going to like it, or you're going to quit.
Right.
You know,
And I
and there's
I
some luck too. Like there's lots of
oh
luck in
yeah,
terms of like how it works, like which school you get into, how who your friends are there. Like it's all very. I mean, it's
that's true. Yeah.
a lot of luck in terms of how it all ends up shaking out. I mean,
Right.
so
Hmm. All right. Well, that's gonna be our intros. We're not gonna bore you any longer. Let's do some real quick like back and forth. Um,
let's get back to the advertising. We don't have any advertising.
it's free real estate.
It's free real estate.
Okay, Xander.
But yeah.
Oh, what? Do you have
Oh yeah.
anything
Well,
else?
I was just gonna say. I mean, I think right. We're trying to segue now. Talk a little bit about our biases to kind of put some of the future conversations in some context because I think that's kind of our hope, right?
Yeah, yeah. So my first question is going to be, what do you consider to be your political affiliation?
Oh yes,
And
political
like semi
affiliation.
quick answers too, not like
Yeah,
essay ones. I feel like we'll get into
yeah.
it, but
I guess I feel like I identify socially very much on the liberal side of things,
hmm
but I've come around, especially in the last couple years, and into more of a little bit more conservative economically and a little bit more of a believer in free markets. Actually, I think
hmm
yeah. So I guess I'm not sure what category that puts you into. I think I if I were to vote, frankly, like I would probably vote for like a Democrat most of the time.
hmm
But if there's like there's Republicans out there with very good like policies, it's just
reasonable.
yeah very reasonable policies. It's mostly just like the insane social stuff that it's just too hard to back those candidates for me. Just kind of as I alluded to in the my upbringing, like anyone these people who are against gay marriage and are against just I mean, fundamentally the hypocrisy of anyone who claims to be conservative and says government should not be in your life to then say, oh wait, hold on, you're gonna go bang that guy? No, you can't do that. That's immoral. Like that, those two
Right.
things to me, I cannot stand.
Right.
So I guess I don't know. If this isn't a political party, but the hypocrisy on both sides. I think this is most people agree, but those
hmm
things to me just frustrate me to no end. And I guess with the social stuff, it's clear. It's definitely I think the liberals on the far on the fringes have gone way too far with the social justice movement and stuff. But generally, like the moderate ones are all pretty good, I think, on those
Yeah,
issues. But I've
yeah.
definitely become more of a believer in free markets, and especially after having worked within the research community and seeing the government funded way of doing things, which
Mhm.
works in some respects, but I see how it doesn't work as well, and how free markets really enable some really unique opportunities and unique innovations in the United States that you don't get everywhere else. So
Right. And I think I'm fairly similar. I mean, that's why we've been friends for years. Shocking, we don't see our politics hugely differently, but I think I probably started from a more conservative point of
yeah,
view, and then, I was really disillusioned with, the Republicans always saying, "Oh, we're gonna figure out the debt as soon as we're in charge. Oh, we're gonna figure out, I can't even think of another. My main thing was fiscal responsibility from the federal government, and that's originally kind of arguably what the Republicans stood for, and then time and time again through administration after administration, nothing's been done. So to me, it's clear at this point that neither party actually cares about being fiscally responsible, um, and
like
they're
it's fun to not be fiscally responsible. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
well, true,
It's
true.
really fun.
And I'm not saying I'm the most fiscally responsible either, but and then people say, oh, you want to cut Medicare, you want to cut SPCA stuff, you want to kill puppies and old people, and it's like, no, I want to like audit the federal government and find a ton of money for all those programs that you want to do, and still cut like both things can be true, and it seems like both parties are bound and determined to never agree with each other. So, I just don't have use for the parties anymore, honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think you've probably identified at points as being libertarian. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I am still a registered libertarian, but after so I and that was who I or what party I most identified with, but after Gary Johnson and that whole fiasco, and frankly, yeah,
Gary.
I mean, yeah, and what is Aleppo? That was funny to like some
Oh,
people, but
yeah, that kind of I forgot. Yeah, it kind of ruined him. Yeah,
yeah,
I think for both of us, I think I sort of don't like playing this middle ground because I think most people are on this kind of in between spot, and most people are like, oh,
oops,
pick all these parties, which is like I think easier to say, but it's generally true. I guess if you don't have to lump yourself into any one of these, and I guess I feel like more independent at the moment, but honestly speaking, I would probably vote Democrat if in like this upcoming election.
yeah, for sure. And
Just
honestly, I would probably vote Republican for most offices, like just as a rule. But
yeah.
so I think our core beliefs are really similar. Maybe we lean in, some would say, opposite ways, but honestly, like I feel like, and
I
see
mean,
th-
I want
oh,
there to be another party, another couple parties.
mm, see, I
That's
I almost think that there shouldn't like be allowed to have a party affiliation on a legal document, like
oh,
uh,
that's an interesting take.
because it's too it and see that goes against people's free speech, though. I know that argument that way as well. It's like, well, if I want to say I'm part of this party, you can't stop me from saying that. So I understand that too, but it devolves into a tribal thing so quickly that it just is not very helpful to people. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But shockingly, my thoughts and opinions change on things, Xander. So I might think
Oh,
something differently at some point.
yeah. Well, I would say, my thoughts definitely. I really did shift going from, Bay Area and California is awesome, but it's a bubble.
Mm,
And if you don't go out, people are like, oh, how could people vote for Donald Trump? Or how could people? It's like go to rural Georgia and just talk to people. Like they're humans. They have certain wants, desires. And you over there, like you living in this city with these sets of conditions, you look at the world very differently, and that's somewhat obvious. But if you don't go there, I think honestly, I think if everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people like went to the South and like hung out and talked to them and just figure, kind of get some of their perspective, and then some of them came over here. I think you come to the realization like why people do certain things. Like I never like an undergrad understood how people could like how can you vote for these people. And but now like I mean I really get it. Like I understand how like I see the appeal. I don't agree, but
You
I
may
see
not
it.
agree, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, I
But it
talked
did
over you.
definitely I think it I did my opinions were a little bit shifted, particularly on how free markets and how businesses operate and how that can be beneficial for the larger society. That's something where I have changed a little bit in my mind. 'Cause I used to be like, oh, like all
Oops.
these like corporations are bad, man. Like
Oops.
all these people doing all this stuff. It's like you guys all work, you guys all buy their cars, use this
Oops.
like they
Hmm.
don't all do great things. I 100% agree. They do lots of corrupt things. Some of them are shitty, but
A lot of
fundamentally,
them sometimes.
you know, so this is the thing I talk to people about in Seattle a lot is everyone goes like, "Oh, Amazon, like they're evil," and I was like, "They brought 100,000 jobs to this area. Like you're gonna tell me like, oh, they don't pay any taxes?" I was like, "But they pay a quarter million people in the Seattle or what? I don't know the numbers.
Right.
They
It's a ton of people.
employ all these people. If they weren't there, what would you guys be doing? I mean, I know you'd be doing something else, but just
Well,
like to just
or
say
a
to just
fraction of
look
those
at one
people.
thing
Yeah.
and just be like, oh, they're evil because they don't pay any taxes. Like, okay, that's a very simplistic take, you know, on
Right.
it.
I think our and that might, be a good sum up point for kind of what we're trying to do with the podcast. It seems like people are in their ideological corners and nothing you can do, a pry bar can't get them out of that. And it's just it's not that hard to hold two opposing ideas in your head. Like you don't have to agree with that other opinion. Like one reason I really wanted to do this was, I don't really like our current president, um, but I can at least see why people vote for him. And I've
Yeah,
had conversations with really, really good friends, and it's just it's impossible for them to even think why someone would vote for Trump.
yeah,
And it's just I don't think that that's what's best for having a conversation for everybody. So, maybe if we can kind of point out a few things from both sides, we both kind of naturally take to maybe opposing sides of the aisle, but I think when we kind of put our intellectual honesty caps on, we can. Apparently, I use that term a lot too because I use that in the
intellectually honest.
no
Yeah, I
intellectual honesty caps,
oh
like
cap.
yeah,
I'm about to put
specifically
this
the
fucking hat
headwear.
on here.
Yeah, exactly.
Get this, throw this little cap on,
It's a
my little
thing with
top
me,
hat.
but yeah, so that's what I think we're trying to do. So if you like it, great. Tell a friend. If you don't, great. Keep it to yourself. And yeah, Zaner, anything else?
No, I mean we just kind of want to talk basically political bias, and I think yeah, I mean
Oh well, yeah.
again,
So we
I
just I only asked one question. We've been talking
yeah,
for like 15 minutes on it.
yeah. I mean you kind of asked just that one question. I mean it's a hard question to answer, and it kind of goes to several
Well, and
different spots very quickly.
I think that this conversation is going to tell people more about us than saying, "What's your political party? What's your are you a Sagittarius? Are you, what's your ship
Yeah,
size?" Like, we could just do that, but I think just having conversations, people will eventually get what we're all about.
yeah. No, I mean I think like you said, we there's a little bit of a flavor we each kind of have that's a little bit different. I mean, I think you're more probably definitely more in favor of smaller governments,
Hmm.
and I kind of have this hard time dealing with that. Seeing well, a couple of things in that I see how shitty large government is, but then I try and like interpolate the alternative, particularly, and this is the thing. Like you live in a big city and you go like, oh, what would happen if there's no organization that it starts anyway there's I see how having a large government can be very helpful though, so I guess this is kind of what you're saying, like having these two ideas. So I guess I'm still wary, and I think I mean this is something we can talk about at some point, but I kind of feel like people sometimes when they say like, oh, we want smaller government, it seems like a oversimplification. Now whether that's true or not, I'm not
Yeah.
sure of. But to me, I always thought like that's a little simplistic. Like just saying, oh, we should just get rid of it. Like okay, I mean,
So that
I
actually,
feel like we've tried that.
uh
I guess from my perspective, like that was the 1800s, like small
right,
governments.
right, and
So to
that
me, it seems more regressive. But You
Uh,
probably have a slightly different take on it.
well, no, no. I should mention too that you that is a major reason that I don't affiliate myself with the Libertarian Party anymore as well. Their ideology is too reductionist for me as
Hmm.
well. And I caught myself doing that, uh, just saying, oh, big government is bad no matter what.
Right.
Just my first instinct was big government is bad. And I started catching myself and eventually challenged myself and said, okay, is it really? And then Xander mentioned one time that, especially back in the day, take the moon mission for example. Um, the government is quite good when it is motivated to do something at large infrastructure type projects. Very very large, logistically, requiring lots of resources. That kind of thing. So, for me, the Libertarian Party is too reductionist to just say smaller government. Like that's not a good argument, and Zaner has actually changed my mind on that recently. So
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, just kind of. I mean, I think that's kind of just the only point, just kind of to highlight,
yeah,
well,
because
differences in that. But
it is reductionist, and it is unfair to say, well, who would build the roads? And the classical libertarian is someone, like
right, right.
a
That's
company would need to, blah blah blah.
yeah.
But then, recently as well, my feelings have started to change on this kind of stuff because it seems like the old rules need not apply anymore. I mean, take our commander in chief as example number one. Like, I'm sorry, but very few people called that. I certainly didn't. And, we have Donald Trump as president. Okay. The rules do not apply anymore. Like, the fact that 401ks were a great idea for the last 100 years, or 80,
Since the
75-ish
70s.
years. Yeah. Oh, I thought they were earlier than that. But
Mm-mm.
for however many years since the 70s, they've been the best idea going. Doesn't mean that that's true anymore. Um, the way business has been done, old fashioned retailers, obviously they're going out of business. It doesn't Business doesn't need to be done that way anymore, so it's not going to be done that way anymore. So
Nick's thrown out all the rules. Doesn't play by anybody's rules, not even his own.
well, it's just weird. Like, you know, the rules are an idea, and all that separates an idea from chaos is other people's ideas of keeping the peace, right?
Yeah.
At
I,
the end of the day.
yeah. Well, that gets to the question: is what holds any society together?
Oh, see, now that is
Boom.
a great question.
That's
Hmm.
some. Yeah, I have not given any thought to this. We're getting a
I
little
haven't
off
either.
track
Yeah,
with
we
the
are,
original
but let's
goal.
talk about this for just a minute and see if it goes
Yeah.
anywhere. But um, that is a good. Okay, so that reminds me about this. I told Xander recently that I'm the world's worst atheist because I say God bless you and Merry Christmas and God damn, like I frequently refer to God, and honestly, I think that church is great for a lot of people. Like, it's it has unleashed quite a bit of horror on the world. I mean, the Crusades, list your uh, religious atrocity from history. But at the same time, uh, it has given people a pretty decent moral compass in some instances to keep a society together. Now, I'm not saying that religion is necessary, but my thoughts on like the need of religion have changed recently. Like, I do think that religion is needed by quite a few people. I don't think we can be a secular society.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
think
mean,
so.
all the. I mean, I was just reading. I mean, it used to be the U.S. was like a crazy outlier in terms of our our continued attendance of church, and only in the last like 5 to 10 years has the
Yeah,
really,
10-ish.
yeah, has like the reduction in people going to church really reduced. I mean, but if you looked at it compared to Germany, Norway, France, England, like their church membership has gone down a lot in the last 50 years. I mean, pretty much post World War II. And
Mm,
you can kind of, I've studied a little bit of existential philosophy, which a lot of them reject a lot of Christianity and this and that.
right.
But it's just interesting that in the US, there has been, and then this is something I've talked to people, like I have a bunch of religious friends, and they very much agree that religion keeps society together and that it keeps America together, and that America was, founded as a religious country, which I sort
Oh,
of
I
take
definitely don't want to,
take
be
issue.
advocating that.
No,
I'm
no, I
just,
know, but I guess what I'm saying is it seems like there is a shift though from people our age to, and I see this, to rejecting most of what church offers.
I think people are rejecting it. I'm not sure it's what's best
But
for
you're not sure if
most
it's what's
people.
best. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be like daddy,
Yeah.
big government person, but you know, recently I've been thinking, it's like, okay, well, what is the goal of a society, right? It's like to extend its own life, right? Like the goal of a society is to keep going.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
don't think. I mean, do you think most people actually, when they're going out, like wake up in the morning, drive their car, are they thinking about what is going to improve society?
no, no, I'm sure not, but I think,
Yeah, but like, why
um,
not? Like
well,
why?
I think some people are, and I think those people are the most fulfilled. Those people that can't, that, are truly passionate about their jobs, or, work in really fulfilling jobs or something. Um,
Yeah.
I think those people do. Like I think that might make you become a doctor or something. Maybe
Right.
a paramedic, but no, no, no. I don't think like on any given day most people commuting to work are thinking about society as a whole. But I mean, you kind of have to take the people out of the society, right? Like we're talking about, a mass of people, not the individual
Hmm.
persons. So I guess it's like, what's best for, like, to me, what's best for a society is continued existence and, uh, you know, basic health factors continuing to rise, or
Oh,
at least
yeah.
being stationary, which
Well,
not
well,
anymore.
well, yeah, right. Well, I was just going to mention, I mean, I just was reading that the last 3 years we have seen for males the average life expectancy, for males in a bunch of states, I think Ohio, Pennsylvania, a couple others, actually going down for the first time in like since the 1960s. I mean,
Hmm.
the average life expectancy is going down because, and they're mostly attributing it to the opioid usage and overdose deaths
Opioid and suicide is are
and suicide. Yeah,
yeah.
which is just anyway. It's interesting you mentioned the health thing because yeah, it seems like
Oops.
like things are regressing. Like people are dying from 100% preventable things.
But then at the same time, our average life expectancy goes down. But you know, now see, now I'm going to switch it back on you. Now, if we go back to the individual people, we zoom back in. The 70-year-old who never tried fentanyl and has always been on the straight and narrow, like that's not that like that statistic shouldn't affect his average lifespan because he's not doing fentanyl.
Right, right. I see what you're saying. I mean, I guess what that statistic, my interpretation is, just younger people are dying more frequently than they did. Like,
Right, right. It's
right.
definitely
So
a bad indicator, but
yeah.
it's one of those indicator, like, because
Well. Here's a
oh, go.
well. I just had a question for you. I mean, I
Okay.
think you're more on personal liberties, and I've come around a little bit more to this too. But I think some people would argue like, well, okay, like why should the government be like, what should the government's role in this be? Should they be trying to help these people? Should they be removing this drug? Should they be,
Oh,
well,
in
it's a
in the
drug,
drug
like,
specifically, in the drug.
yeah, well, like the drug one specific, like what level of
Oh
like
man,
personal responsibility comes in terms of like,
yeah,
well, like, you are
this is a
doing
good
this
question.
drug, and you know, you should take some responsibility to get sober before you die, like, which I don't agree. I don't. I'm just kind of asking because I think a lot of people go. I mean, I was talking to someone about this, and there's people who believe like drug addiction and this and that is like a personal choice in some ways.
right. I mean, that's
Which is
what
it's a complicated topic, but
for yeah, definitely.
I guess like what role do you think the government should be? Because this is one of those areas where you go, okay, like should a government be like this needs to stop? Like we're coming in like
Oops.
this company they they can't do this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is it's a great question because it is so far ranging and it does expose a new audience member to a bunch of different kind of ways of thinking about it. But um, I'm a little bit more liberal on the drug stuff. I think marijuana, first of all, should be regulated just like alcohol. It should be way more available than it is. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm
Okay.
not comfortable like some libertarians are with full drug legalization. Like that's one thing where I kind of take a step back and say, I'm not really comfortable with that. You
So
know,
yeah,
I'll have the conversation about safe places and clean needles and stuff. Like I'm not, my gut reaction is no, don't do that. But I'm open to the conversation and I'm open to hearing about data. Um, I don't think that the government should have much say in trying to get people to quit. So
okay.
I guess I don't, hmm, because that brings up too the fact that I wonder how many lawmakers got paid off by Purdue Pharma, for example, the leader of the opioid crisis, or for the media
Yeah.
it is. I wonder how much money got spread around, and I wonder how many Republican people that conservatives might, you know, think are on their side got paid off. So, I used to trust what the FDA said as gospel, basically. If they said it was safe to take, I wouldn't think anything of it. After so many recalls and so many, scandals and so many things, I don't. A government seal of approval to me is no longer any more valid than someone whose opinion I respect on the internet. Like honestly, if Joe Rogan said this is safe for you to take, I would take that over something that the
Interesting.
government
That's
said, hey, this is safe to take. Like I'd be like, government, I don't know, man. Like Joe's probably taking this, like and he fine, like your food tables a complete scam or your
right.
food pyramid thing, like you can point to scandal after scandal after scandal of you know taxpayer money going to private companies, and that's the unholy trinity of or unholy duality, something. I don't know. I'm tired, people. You know, you can't at this point separate the government from industry anymore either. So it's kind of one of those
Mm.
things. We can talk about this in a vacuum, but that's not our actual, you know,
Yeah.
reality anymore. So.
So this is like my question for a lot of people who have kind of like a libertarian leaning as well.
Hmm.
There's this mistrust. It seems like there's this kind of odd sort of hypocrisy in that there's a mistrust of the government, but there's seemingly more trust in companies, large companies.
I think
That's
that's evaporating,
and
but
I think it is, but I've always been kind of fascinated. Like, oh, you don't trust like
oops,
this big government. Like, oh, like no, I'm gonna go. Like, I trust
oops,
Tyson chicken nuggets. Like, they have a economic incentive to make their products good. It's like
right.
yes and no. I guess I've always kind of been interested in that sort of. To me, it's sort of like you just said. You don't trust the government. Like you don't like
So that's
you know.
yeah, that's a perfect example because a few years ago I would have said, yeah, I would trust
Oops.
chicken nuggets because they do have an economic, incentive to keep me safe and healthy and keep me and my kids buying their nuggets for forever. Until the last few years have eroded my trust in big corporations as well. Like I think I put big corporations on the same exact mistrust pedestal as the government at this point. Um, and yeah, so.
I like to treat big corporations a little bit like a mob figure. If you pay them on time, and you pay the protection money, you can get treated pretty good in some ways. And you do have to be as a consumer be very careful, and you have to question them. But I've looked at it as like I'll pay, I'll pay them off, like I'll pay like what do you guys want from me? Like you want
Well,
these
see, I
automatic
feel like
payments?
that
Like
about the government.
yeah, but I feel like there is.
Because the government to
Yeah,
me is scarier because they have people with guns who can shoot you.
true.
Okay,
That is
like
true.
I love police officers and I am a huge supporter of police officers, but I am mistrustful of anyone with a gun and a badge. And
Hmm.
I hate to say that, but I love individual police officers. I'm very mistrustful of police, if that makes sense.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I've had so many mixed encounters. Most of them have been fine with cops, but also just strange, like nothing like arrested, but just
Hmm.
strange encounters. But before I forget, we're talking about this drug
Oh
money
yeah,
and
yeah.
politics, and I just quickly brought up that drug manufacturers. Now this is again a little simplistic, but they gave the most money to lobbyists of any group. Last year, 2019, 240 million for lobbying purposes. The second industry below them was the insurance at
I,
157 million.
I was just gonna say, yeah, healthcare as a whole is always number one in lobbying every year. So if you lump those together, essentially,
Yeah,
um, yeah,
man, just yeah,
it's bad, but it's so intertwined at this point. You have a 40,000 page document. Uh, you know, Obamacare when it was passed, people were given 24 hours to read it and then vote on it. Like, you know, it, I mean, we could talk here literally for another 16 hours on this, and I still and I wouldn't get bored of it, but people wouldn't listen. So,
yeah,
going back to the drug thing, just to try to sum up
yeah. I was
thoughts.
originally kind of concocting the question in that, yeah, like personal liberty in these situations versus government influence is sort of what these are the issues where I have a hard like I don't have a good answer either, but am sort of
Yeah, I mean, I
on
would.
the drug one. I'm personally skeptical. I think drug addiction and stuff, it's not as simple as deciding to do things, not do things. Like drug addiction is a different case. Just my personal
Yeah, and I think
belief, and I
my
think there's evidence to support that too.
yeah, my attitude has changed on this recently too, but I think I go at it more as a healthy society. So I'm thinking like more because like a healthy society is better for my daughter. It's just like a selfish thing, right? Like I want my
Mhm.
daughter to grow up in a better environment. So that means I want more people healthy and happier,
Right.
basically, right? Like advancing forward, moving towards something, like lifting themselves up and being slightly better off than their parents, kind of thing. I think that always constant, at least push forward, is really healthy for society. Um,
So in the context of this situation, in some ways it makes sense for the government to play like come in as they're kind of doing and saying
oh,
like, hey, like
right. So
like
right.
Purdue, Johnson and Johnson, like you guys fucked
Oops.
up. You guys have to help. We're you guys got to sell these shares. You got to like dismantle this. Kind of playing the role. Guiding. I mean, in some ways, that is guiding the economy, right?
But then they were tricked in the first
That is
place.
not capitalism, right?
That's true, but they were tricked in the first place to approving all this stuff.
Right. So you go,
So
did they game the system? Now they have kind of retribution to do this stuff. And I mean, I generally agree. I don't know all the details, but I think
right.
they do need to play some role because yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my old attitude would have been like, you know what, they made a choice to be a junkie, so let them be a junkie and starve to death and die like that. It's just, hey, that was your life choice. If you're my thing was always if you're mentally ill, I'm fine with my tax dollars going to help you. If you make a choice, then I'm not fine with that.
Right.
And that's easy to say, and that's pretty reductionist too, because you can't go on a case by case basis with a 300 million, person population. It's
Right.
just impossible, right? So, I understand that at a certain point in the day, you can't do these individual things for individual people. So, as a whole, I think you know somehow incentivizing hospitals and pharmacies give out that or not Suboxone, but that little shot that goes in your nose, Narcan for free, basically. Like you can go almost anywhere and get it for free, and it's like a magic wand basically for bringing back someone who is overdosing. Like they could be in
Yeah.
full in overdose, and you squirt that in their nose, and they're fine. So I mean, I think that's a good step. They recently changed 988 as the national suicide hotline number now. Like, those are small little things that are good that a free market probably wouldn't have had any market forces demand, right?
Right.
So, I again, I want to make it clear I can see the use and the successes of big government. I just think it should be. I think we're too big at this point, and it needs to
Mhm.
be reined in. And if we rein it in, we'd have tons more money for stuff that we really want to spend it on. So
Yeah.
it's like I would like to be Santa Claus at the end of the day. I just want to like make sure we have the money to do that. you know.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, and I think to me like the problem, and now this is kind of going to frame it in a couple different ways, bringing in some concepts from mathematics and computer science. But I see like people are like, oh, government's too big, it needs to shrink. Well, to me, it needs to be a little bit more flexible,
Mm-hmm.
and in
Right.
the sense like you probably don't see like most people don't see this, but when you're going on to a big website like Twitter or Facebook or like someone where lots of users are going on at a million users might go on like right after work and like only 100,000 go on in the middle of the day or something. So like there's this flexible amount of use, and so
Mm-hmm.
like they scale the number of computers available dynamically to basically like accomplish this goal because they have a lot of people coming online. So I kind of see like the problem is like the structure of the government's very inflexible to like scale up to like solve big problems, then scale down when it's like doesn't need to be there.
It's
So to me,
always
it's like
scaled
this
down that
this
never happens, right?
right, and this kind of comes back to this problem, these problems in mathematics where like it's easy to go one direction, but it's very hard to go back. It's this commutability problem where like it's easy to go like do this number times this number to get this, or like this object times this object to get this other one, but it's hard to like reverse those. And
Mm-hmm.
if they had more of these properties where you could kind of go back and forth and like, okay, we can regulate this, but then we can deregulate it.
Right.
And I would say like I thought this was like universally true, but I actually have really in Washington State a really interesting example of actually where there is a good deregulation coming, and it's actually with smog laws, which sounds strange, but in 1989 in Seattle or King or excuse me in Washington State they passed legislation to everyone had to smog their cars like they do in California, but they put in the legislation we'll remove this if the air quality goes back to these certain levels or and after 30 years we'll reevaluate and we'll see if they're at these levels, then like we've accomplished our goals. So they're actually removing the need
Wow.
to isn't that it's really
I
interesting,
believe
right?
they're actually removing it. Wow.
Yeah, that's the now 2020, like you don't have to smog your car anymore.
Wow.
So like
Well,
that's an
good for
example of
them.
like
The gun
the
laws suck.
like a smart legislation where like it's flexible, right? Like okay, we have criteria, and I just see like California like smog everyone you gotta fucking
Oops.
do this, and it just and the smog stuff like cars were really dirty. Now they're dirty. They're less dirty in terms of their particulate, and also the smog laws people could get around them, and they always affected poor people who had old cars.
Oh,
So
for
I always
sure.
thought it was like fucked
Oops.
up. Like anyway, so that's like an example of like you need to like I just see like the flexibility and the framework is the problem. Like I'm not as interested in individual laws as much in terms of casting them in a way that they can commute back and they can be reduced and they can scale up and like programs can scale up and down.
Hmm.
Which is really it's easy to say that, but it's
I was
hard to
gonna
do.
say it's hard with people who are very inflexible, especially with their careers.
Yeah.
If you needed, like let's say
I mean I don't know
needed
how
a
any of this
tenant,
looks in practice. I'm just like these are the
right?
principles I think need to be talked about, like scalability and these things. People think about these things very deeply, and people at Amazon and Facebook, like they understand how to solve these problems in business. Like I think these things can be transferred over. So
Right.
just my
Okay. Well,
overarching little spiel there.
we're gonna do one last question because we're already at over an hour.
Oh, yep.
Um, Xander, how do you feel about guns?
Oh, this is a good one. I really I would say this is one where like you've definitely changed my perspective a bit. I mean, growing up, my parents don't have any guns, never really liked them. Well, I should say my dad actually grew up with a lot more guns than I ever knew about.
Hmm.
but they were in rural New Hampshire. Everyone like guns were like coffee tables. Like everyone just
Right.
had them and traded them anyway.
Right.
But I guess I originally was, I would say probably 10 years ago, I was pretty like, I was like, we don't really like, people don't need guns. I don't really like them. I don't see the need. It seems outdated. It's a little silly.
Hmm.
I've come around a bit in terms of I can understand, especially like going to rural Alabama or Georgia. Like I can see like, okay, you're
Oops.
in the middle of nowhere. Like you actually might need some protection.
Hmm.
Like I can understand that. I can understand at least the sense people might, whether it's true or not, they feel like they are still keeping some power from the government
Hmm.
in terms of having guns. Um, I still think there are just so many guns here, and we just have so many gun deaths compared to all these other countries. It seems like we are doing something a bit wrong with our gun policy. So I think it needs to change, but I'm not just again like banning guns or
Yeah.
things that extreme. I was a little bit more like that, but I'm kind of more. I understand why you'd want to have a gun. I don't think they should all be taken away, but at the same time, like how many mass shootings are we gonna have?
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a change. It's easy in a lot like Washington actually has super flexible gun laws. Like it's easy to get a gun here. Um,
It's
and I
becoming
just think some of
harder
these
though.
things need to be changed a little bit. In my
Yeah.
um,
So
I
this
also
is. Oh.
the last thing I'll say on guns
Hmm.
is I'm sort of fascinated by people who get them and get no training and don't think about how they would actually perform in the situation. Like I see most people like I got a gun. Like
Right.
okay, great. Like have you thought about killing someone? Have you thought about how you'd use it, when you'd use it, how you would aim it, how you would control your breathing, what kind of those things sort of you know. And
Which.
also just I feel like they escalate situations too more
Yeah.
in certain situations than they need to be. So that's kind of my overarching
Yeah.
feelings on them.
For for sure. I think this might be one of our maybe bigger disagreements, but it seems like we can have this disagreement pretty politely. I'm a gun owner myself. I have quite a few. I had even more at one point before kids and responsibilities, but I do think that um, I do think that the right to bear arms should be continued, even for the average populace. I've seen too many story like I do understand the impact and the emotional you know reaction to mass shootings. Like I'm not made of stone. Like it affects me. I'm a dad. Like I can't even imagine the pain of that. And you know if I was ever in a room with the survivor from a kid who died in a mass shooting, I wouldn't talk guns with him. You know what? I would try to talk to him about his kid because that's what's gone. The gun, this inanimate object that yes can be wielded by evil people or disturbed people, whatever you want to say, and cause a lot of death. Yes, that is possible, and guns make it easier. I'm not here to say that oh they could just use a knife. Like yeah they could, but not in every situation. That's not a fair argument to say. But I have also seen a lot of stories about elderly people defending themselves in their homes, especially in more rural areas where the police physically could not have gotten to them in time, and the attackers had deadly intent. I've seen those classic cases where the police show up and say, "Yeah, you did everything right. Like we got nothing to say." If they want to sue you in civil court, which is a whole nother issue, if they want to sue you in civil court, they can do that, but we're not pressing charges. I've seen single women who had a restraining order that didn't get there in time, and they were waiting for their background check for their gun when their husband killed them, their ex-husband.
Yeah.
Like, that happens, and that's real, and that's a real story, and that's a real person gone. You know, I'm not immune to the mass shootings where they have multiple people with that same story. I get it. It's horrible. But I think that more training, more access to mental health care, that's one thing that I do not care basically how much tax money is spent on. I think that mental health care should be one of our highest priorities in public spending. Like I would be fine with a tax rate. Well, I say a tax raise, but they always use the money for something else. People, that's the dirty secret, or at least part of the money. But I would be fine with tax money going to that. So you know, I don't have the perfect solution to mass shootings. I don't have the perfect solution to gun deaths and suicide. I mean, the number one, um, you know, method of suicide is firearm. I mean, it's far and away the most used, and that's horrible for each of those families. I understand that better than some, um, but I also understand that the individual choice can't always like freedom and liberty is scary. It's been scary for over 200 years that our country has been around. Like, I would rather take dangerous liberty than something something servitude. I forget the exact quote, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's easy for me to say that because I do own guns and I feel like I can protect myself. I by the way have taken hours of training.
Yeah, Nick, I would say has taken. He's good with the gun.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Seen him
taken
shoot. Yeah.
professional level courses. I've competed before. I take weapon safety very seriously. So I strive to be the ideal gun owner to be an example for other people. But I also understand, and I've worked in a gun store before too, and I know you know, that guns are got by sketchy people and criminals. And, I know that our system is not perfect. Background checks are not perfect. Um, our laws are not perfect. We could talk about the new wave of 3D printable guns too, that is going to make a lot of the laws just really pointless. I mean, we can get into all the nuances of the gun issue, but I think at the end of the day, my heart is open in sympathy to people who are victims of gun violence, but at the same time, I I respect those people's right to choose their self protection, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a interesting topic. I think we're gonna revisit it later in the NRA episode.
Yeah, definitely
So
for sure. We'll
yeah, I
dive
think
deep.
that's an
So
interesting one to talk about because there's probably more disagreement, and it's not it's an opinion it's something I think about, but not probably as often as you. So it'd probably be an interesting discussion. I think.
yeah, for sure. And I try not to live and die by anything anymore. I'm not so I try not to be so wrapped up in anything that I can't at least try to see the other person's point of view. So I can totally respect your point of view on these things. And shockingly to some people, we don't agree on guns very much, but we're still friends. So
Right.
that's crazy, but
Yeah.
it's possible.
Well,
So all right,
you want to
uh,
wrap this sucker up?
I think we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you for joining us again. If you listen to another hour of us talking, seriously, you need some help again. Maybe some mental health care for you. We'd be fine to pay for that. All right, Zaner, anything to add?
Nope. That's it. Thanks, everyone.